Mrs. Kramer?
Here.
Mrs. Lane?
Here.
Mrs. Rich? Mrs. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Kraftcheck?
Here.
Mr. Parzak?
Here.
The meeting is now open. Adequate notice of the meeting was provided by posting a copy of the time and place on the municipal clerk's bulletin board and mailing a copy of same to the press and the Cape May County Herald on January 6, 2018. Will everyone please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start the work session with Public Safety. Councilman Parzak.
We'll hear from the court administrator first, since she always takes up so much time.
One of these times I'm going to catch you. Good afternoon. And again, things are running smooth. We're down to one court a month starting next month, and we'll see what the winter brings. Any questions for me?
Doesn't appear so, thank you, Debbie. Fire chief?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have a report for the summer season from Memorial Day to Labor Day. During that period, we responded to 109 fire calls. That's down 2 from the previous summer. 236 EMS calls, and that's down 11 from the previous summer. Some highlights of the summer is we had 8 building fires, and that's up from the previous year. 10 cooking fires, that's up from the previous year. And we had 25 EMS assists, which is up from the previous year. We averaged 19 firefighters per call, and that's my report.
Thank you.
Did you say 25 EMS calls? Had more than that, weren't there?
No, I said 236.
Oh, okay. Well, what, didn't you say something about 20, at the end, 25?
Oh, we averaged 19 firefighters per call?
No, okay, never mind.
We had 25 EMS assists. That's where-
EMS
that's where-
assist,
that-
okay.
That's where the
so-
fire department goes out to assist the EMS. That's separate from
I
the
see,
EMS call.
okay, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, chief.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The monthly report for August 2018 for the police department, excuse me, there were 299 motor vehicle stops and 11 adults were arrested. In terms of personnel update, we currently have 1 Class 1 officer working until the end of the month, and 9 Class 2s working until the end of the month. Pending the approval tonight, we would hope to keep 1 Class 2 on until the end of November, a 60-day extension to cover personnel shortages, which I spoke about last meeting, where we had 1 officer that was supposed to leave for military training at the end of August. Those orders have since been delayed. We're supposed to hear something within the next 2 weeks or so, so it's kind of like a limbo situation with that particular officer. We have 2 full-time officer candidates that will meet with the Public Safety Committee this week for approval, and if all goes well, then we would like to have them sworn in October, first meeting in October. And we have already begun the interviewing for Class 2s and 1s for 2019, which we have quite a few applicants already. That's it on personnel. In terms of a building update, I attended a meeting this morning. Construction is going along smoothly as expected. That's pretty much all I have.
Just question on the police building, that once the new building gets done, then they'll occupy the new building and then renovations will happen on the first floor,
Correct.
right? And that's going, okay. And that's all supposed to be, in January, you're supposed to be in the new building, correct?
If all
That's the
goes-
word on the street?
If all goes well, that word on the street is incorrect.
Okay.
If all goes well, if all goes well,
Okay.
sometime in December.
Okay. And then they'll renovate,
Correct.
okay. Okay.
This summer season, chief, compared to last summer, about the same
Yeah, I
as
think
far
we
as
were right on par
problems,
pretty
or
much, for the most part.
no
Yeah.
big surprises?
No, I think we were pretty even with the type of incidents we responded to. I don't, there was one or two that were a little different than the norm, but overall, I think everything was right on par.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chief. And Captain Bazzacco.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm pleased to report another safe and successful summer. This summer, we had 19 rescues, 8 EMS calls, 10 police calls, and 15 lost children were found. That's in line with the past few summers. Nothing really changed. There are less lost children, like half as many, and I think it might be because these kids have phones, so they're able to, their parents can find them. As is the case with most jobs, when you do a good job, there's nothing to talk about. So I feel like the guards, we have a safe day, we leave, there's no noise. So, they did it, they are, by and large, high school and college students. They work 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, they're in the public eye all day, they interact with hundreds of people every day. And I commend them for their job. It's not an easy job. They're in the rain, they're in the heat, the sun, you name it. And I want to thank Mayor, Council, and the administration for all your support. It's very important for our success, and that's my report.
Thank you. Any
Thank you,
questions?
Sandy.
Thank you. Good job.
The OEM coordinator couldn't make this meeting. We have a public safety meeting on Thursday, so one of the things we'll do is go through all the lessons learned from the past summer, what we need to do differently this summer, what adjustments we need to make, and then we'll report all that a month from now at the next council meeting when we're scheduled for public safety. Okay?
I received an email that I wanted to share with everybody that, along the lines of almost what Sandy just said, is we don't get the good reports. We usually only hear when something bad has happened. So I just got an email the other day from someone, and I said, can I read your email at our work session, and can I use your name? And she said, certainly. So here we go. Dear Mayor, my annual summer tradition is to visit dear friends in Avalon for a few days of mini golf, beach walks, Jersey corn, and a little shopping in Stone Harbor. Unfortunately, this year I took a tumble on Tuesday, September 4th, while crossing the street. I'm writing to let you know how wonderfully I was treated by everyone in your town. From the other pedestrians stopping to help, to the shopkeepers coming out with ice and water, to the immediate arrival of your police officers, and to the unbelievable care and attention given to me by the EMTs, I knew I was in good hands. Having my friend by my side was a huge help as well. I would like to give a particular note of thanks to the EMT who rode in the ambulance with me. If there is any way you can find out who he is and let him know how grateful I am for his kindness, I would be most appreciative. I do have some injuries, but they will heal, and it could have been much worse. I wanted you to know that you should be very proud of your townspeople, and I look forward to seeing you again next summer. Sincerely, Donna Hires. So it's nice when you start these emails, it's usually with a little like, they're like, ah.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly.
I mean, it's
what
like, all right, Donna.
you mean. Wow, good news.
So I should have read it before Roger left. I'll give it to him so he can get the name of that EMT and make sure that something goes in their file, that they were particularly noticed. So, anything else, public safety?
No, along the same lines, I saw someone on a bicycle who fell. And I immediately was stopping my car, and there were so many people around that person that they all took care of him. And she wasn't hurt. So it's just nice that people do take care.
Yep.
That's it, Mayor.
Okay. Recreation and tourism.
Well, for those who don't know, we suffered a very serious loss in our loss of Miranda Duca. She's still alive, but she's not with us. She took another job, and we will miss her. And as Ray referred to a meeting a few minutes ago on Thursday morning for public safety, immediately after that meeting, we will conduct a beach rec and tourism meeting or a rec and tourism meeting, at which time we will discuss some of the applications that have come in to take her place, and that's not going to be easy. And we will also be discussing what's going on in recreation and tourism, and it's being overseen right now by Jill and Kim in our office and Shelley down at Rec. So right now, we're at a bit of a standstill. We're in a little bit of limbo, but as soon as we bring someone on board, we hope to get the ball rolling again. And that's that.
And we will miss Miranda. You have anything to add, Jill? Anything,
Pretty much
even that we're
summed it up.
working on in rec and tourism, or anything that,
Basically, we're just trying to get ahead of the island holiday. Kim does have Miranda's book, so she's been going through that and making notes, and we are going to have a meeting with Nick Pittman on Thursday. He'll come in and we'll talk to him about that. So trying to get as much of the legwork done before we actually get a live body in here.
and she left you good records and documents.
She did,
and
yeah.
So, it's good hands.
Yep.
Natural resources.
Lenore, who's first?
I
Natural
don't know if you want to
resources.
do the presentation or have Lenore, I'd say have Lenore do her report first, and then we can do the presentation.
Sounds good.
Good afternoon, everyone. A few things from Natural Resources. I wanted to start with the update on the point and the vehicle access that was discussed. As you all know, we had significant water levels associated with the remnants of Tropical Storm Gordon. That caused, between the water levels and the high surf, that caused significant flooding at Stone Harbor Point, and as well as elsewhere on the island. And for those that don't know, the water levels, preliminary elevation numbers are 5.04 feet at 10 o'clock on the 9th. If you're wondering about what that number was, that's off of the gauge here. So just kind of, we talk a lot about numbers. I'm just trying to put that, that event in perspective. Those water levels, however, effectively ended the nesting season on Stone Harbor Point. So that wasn't great news. The remaining unfledged chicks that were out there were not at high enough ground, we should say. So there were only about 8 chicks out there at the time. Overall, the colony did extremely well. It was a very productive season. That was really the tail end of the chicks that were out there, and we'll have final counts on the nesting and fledge counts that were out there. But Stone Harbor Point was incredibly successful. We just didn't quite get all the way to the finish line courtesy of that high water event. The New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife was here asking to keep the point closure in place until those chicks had fledged. Obviously, there are no longer unfledged chicks at the point, so the restriction on vehicles at the point is no longer necessary. Having said that, the site is currently unfenced. They lost a lot of the fencing with that high water. The division is planning on being out tomorrow as best they can to re-fence the critical habitat to keep vehicles out of that area. They're trying to do that tomorrow. Their next installation window is next Wednesday. Once this is completed, they're comfortable with the point being reopened. We discussed that a little bit and trying to balance conservation needs with access needs for the public. And Division of Fish and Wildlife is comfortable recommending an opening on Saturday, September 22nd, so that hopefully it's fenced, but if it's not fenced, it's only a few days till it would be fenced next week. And there's also a pretty good sense that a high percentage of the vehicle users down there are very respectful of those environments and those habitats, and they're aware of them, so it's unlikely that even if it were unfenced, they would get up into those critical habitats. That may not be the case with day-use folks, but we're feeling pretty confident, I think, with a recommendation that the borough, if they so choose, could work to open the point for vehicle traffic beginning on Saturday, September 22nd.
Do we have to do a motion for that, since we did, would we do a motion or a resolution with the other one?
Did we do?
It was
Forget.
a
Or
motion.
can we undo it with a motion?
I think you should do a motion.
Okay, okay.
Okay, similar, on that similar track, the U.S. Geologic Survey study that was the subject of discussion here, they got to town, they rented houses, they brought their vehicles, they got their trucks, they got all set up, and they got out for a grand total of 1 day, and then they went home. So high surf and elevated water levels just put them in a position where they were not going to be able to be working on the front beach. So they apparently still have houses rented until the 24th, but I'm guessing at this junction it's late enough. The surf conditions are still not great. So it looks like this field season is effectively over. They will reschedule for next year, and they understand the May or September, October timeframes to respect the usage of the beaches. So, so that's an update on that.
And just,
there's-
what exactly are they surveying? What are they doing? What's
They're
their goal?
So they were funded by the feds through there were a whole series of those Hurricane Sandy resilience grants that came out. So they were asked, Congress is basically asking for an assessment of how effective those projects were. So they're doing, there's like 20 of these projects that are being assessed. Stone Harbor Point is one of them. But trying to assess the effectiveness of the habitat on Stone Harbor Point 5-6 years after Sandy, we know how much the sand moves. They can't do it. So it was kind of not the best design, but they didn't put up with the design. They were handed this and said, go assess this. When they looked at it, they realized the only way they could really try to understand anything about Stone Harbor Point is to understand all the sand movement on the point. One could argue that may already be sort of known with all the work Stu Farrell does, but anyway, that's the way the world works. So they were charged with doing that. In order to do that effectively, they decided that the best way to do that was to understand the sand movement. So what they're doing is they're taking profiles of the near shore. Basically, they're mapping all the sand by looking at the offshore profiles in two different ways. There's a second group of those folks that are here today, I believe, and they are installing current meters and ways to track how much water is moving in and out of the inlet, and they're doing it as a pair to that, right, as the sand coming around. It'll help with sand movement. It'll also feed into some of the Army Corps work in terms of thinking about.
And they're focused just on the point. They're not looking at the sand
They're
like
not.
Stockton does
So
out front, so to
the
speak.
main study is looking at the whole island. These guys are coming in and they're looking at how the sand's wrapping around the back side. So they're
Okay.
talking about putting, they're gonna be only on boat, they're not actually coming into the marshes, but they're setting up some equipment in the channel that actually feeds into the old CDF.
Okay.
That waterway. So we've been in communication back and forth with them about how they would do that, and they were in a this week pending, you know, the concern with what Florence was gonna do. So I suspect if they didn't get here today, they will be here this week to do that, but it's part of the study. They're gonna, you know, they're gonna be out there for like, you know, just collecting remote data for more than a year.
Okay,
So that stuff will go in.
thanks.
Yeah. Quick update on the sanctuary. The docent-led tours finished. They basically run from Memorial Day to Labor Day. They're on Saturdays and Sundays, except in June, it's just on Sunday. There were 194 people that went on tours. As always, it's really highly variable. Attendance day to day. We'll get nobody and then 25 people the next day. So some of it's weather, some of it's what was going on in town, some of it, you know, it's just really random on when folks do and don't come in. Fall planning is underway. We're working with Public Works on fall prep for the sanctuary. There's some invasive species management, some of the plant management that's ongoing. There'll be some tree and brush clearing, downed items and things like that from the high winds. Some trail maintenance. The Holly Path is set to reopen on October 1st, so that will, I know Public Works is already working on that. They have that scheduled to make sure that those pathways are clear for that. We designed and ordered new signage for the 3 trailheads. That's arrived. Public Works has it. They'll get those in as their schedule fits. And the Sanctuary Committee is currently working on replacement signage for the bigger signs. These are the trailhead signs are the small ones that just tell you you're at Egret SB or Meadow Overlook and what you can see there. The next round of signage, which is in this year's budget already, is to replace some of the bigger signage. That's the big triangle signs that by the pump house and by Holly Path. There's some much bigger signs. You'll be pleased to know that the net will be less than there are currently there, but they just really all need to be updated. They're faded, and we're going with the same company, same design, so all the signs will have the same look when we get there. So those are the next phase. There is a meeting of the Sanctuary Committee next week, and they'll be discussing a host of items, including 2019 budgeting, some invasive species management, and thinking about some longer-term planning and management for the sanctuary that I think is a good time. We had a field trip as the committee. I don't remember when that was. It was supposed to be short. It was 3 hours plus, and a lot of good conversations, a lot of good discussions by folks there. So I think we're ready for some other conversations about some things that we want to think about, and we'll bring back to Natural Resources Committee. On the subject of vegetation management, the Natural Resources Committee met with Lomax Consulting at their last meeting to review the policy on maintenance pruning associated with the black pine projects that are, one of which is ongoing, others are under discussion. Specifically, the one we're talking about is 115th to 118th Street. That was kind of the first plan that went in, and as we started getting in it, there's a couple of places we think that we can clarify some policies and create some guidelines for maintenance pruning. This was specifically for whether there's a need for annual pruning of native plants. So it's not, so the whole first part is the removal of invasives and taking out the black pines. New vegetation goes in, but then there's a question of can you continue to maintain pruning of healthy plants. And we didn't have that well spelled out, so I think we did that now. We came to an agreement. I think it's, I like to call it common sense conservation. I think it's understandable, it's easy to implement, so that'll become part of the memorandum for the project people in the community that are running that project, and then potentially be an amendment to the overall plan. They're working on the details of that, but the project partners are pleased with the outcome. I think the committee's pleased with the outcome. It was just a very sensible way to get at it. It was something we were just silent about, so it's one of those, you do one and you figure out what needed some clarification. The other item that I was asked to report on is the plastics ordinance. That's now in place. Last time we were here, we talked about the potential need to address some amendments associated with that. That at the time we were worried about the governor signing a bill, and everyone wanted to get this one in. So there were a couple of items that were discussed, and it's time to, at that time you agreed that you thought you'd come back with an amendment, get it in place and come back with an amendment. The revisions address the need to better define what constitutes a reusable bag, and in response to comments made by Surfrider. If you recall, they came in and brought up some topics. And this is, we did a lot of research looking at best practices and also looking at studies that came out of Texas, where several major cities had implemented those single-use bag bans, and what their definition of recycled bag was, and effectively what happened. And there was a recommendation to adjust a definition, and I can give you the specifics. It's actually section 19.01, a definition of what a reusable carryout bag is. The language you have talks about it. It's constructed out of any of the following materials. This is the current language, says it's cloth, washable fabric, or other durable materials. And then it says that it could be recyclable plastic with a minimum thickness of 2.25 mils. And then it goes on to say it has a minimum lifetime of 125 uses, can be carried so far with so heavy. So pretty much that's what they say. And the recommendation is to amend what's basically 1901 N3B to, instead of saying a minimum thickness bag, which is where the problem lies, is to change that line to 100% recycled PET plastic and recyclable. So it would be effectively just changing that definition, and the reason for that is they found that the thicker mil plastic, which is thicker than your standard single-use bag now, was actually still being used as a disposable bag. And ending up in the clogging up the recycle stream and getting into the waste stream. So effectively, that gap made it a little bit worse because we were actually using more energy to create thicker bags, and they were still ending up in the waste stream. So that correction, that amendment to redefine what a plastic bag is, should solve that. It also directs it to a fully recycled bag, which also gets you, recycling works when it's a loop, and you actually reuse some of the items that are recycled. So we believe that will solve that. There was a second component in section 1902C, and that's regarding a definition of an acceptable paper bag. So if a vendor or merchant wanted to use a single-use paper bag, the current ordinance says it can be 40% recycled content. It has to be 40%. It turns out if you research that, it really needs to be 80% or higher. So the substitution would be from 40% to 80%. research basically shows that recycled content of 80% or higher is actually, it gets you where it's less environmentally impactful to make a paper bag than a plastic bag. So if you leave it at a lower recycled content bag, you get the benefit on the end side of the pollution side and how it breaks down, but you don't get the benefit on the front side where you're using more energy to create it. So by moving that to 80%, you actually now use less energy on the environmental side, less water to create the bag, using recycled content again. So we're closing that loop. So these two amendments, Jill has the specific language. I would recommend and urge you to adopt. These will also be the only two differences, to my knowledge, between the Avalon ordinance, which has also passed, and yours. 'Cause theirs hadn't been submitted at the time when we made these corrections. So theirs, we're able to make that on the front side, whereas yours, you were already in process, didn't want to pull back. So there's a recommendation for those two amendments to be placed. That's
And to that ordinance, we're meeting with the Chamber on September 27th with members of the Chamber. It seems like the most concerns coming from the restaurants and takeout type places. That's where the majority's coming from. So coming to that meeting is Surfrider Foundation, MUA coordinator, recycling coordinator, Bandana's restaurant owner, who is a Surfrider certified restaurant, just to give some kind of advice to some of our restaurants. Who else do we have coming?
Vendors.
A vendor, a paper and plastic vendor that Bandanas uses, that presently other people use, other restaurants use in town. So it'll be the same vendor that's actually using Bandanas. So I would suggest, if we're thinking seriously about those changes, that be the ordinance we talk about on September 27th.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
recommend that.
Okay.
That's the kind of stuff they would need to know before they.
That the paper product
That's
person
correct.
needs to know. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And if, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when we talked about this and we worked through recommendations on what the ordinance looked like, the trickiest part of this was, in fact, that single-use, the serving things. And I think we came up with a pretty good, to allow the compostable component of that, because those are readily available. So, but there is a learning curve for them to decide what works best for their hot food.
And maybe it's actually
that.
good, though, that before we make any changes, we have this meeting, because maybe something else will flesh out when we're in the room with
Yep.
everybody. So that's good.
Where is that meeting?
That's at the library, second floor of the library.
What time?
It's 9 a.m. It's the regular chamber board meeting, and then they're putting out an invitation to all of their membership.
Okay, any other?
Anything else for natural resources?
Can't think of anything.
Okay.
The presentation on the sewer pump station. Harvey,
Come on up.
you're up.
Good afternoon, members of the council and mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon to present the project, which essentially comprises the replacement of your sanitary sewer pump station, in addition to building a new stormwater pump station on the same site. Ryan McGowan is here with me. I'm Jim Orris from Remington Vernick Engineers, and we're the project engineers on this particular project. It's a very complex project in as much as it's on a very small site. So we're happy to report to you with regard to the sanitary sewer pump station. That project has been permitted. We've worked through many of the details of the project bid specifications and plans. I'd like to thank Mr. Loper and Mr. Russ and all the members of council that have provided us input on that project, because it's really been a very good working relationship so that we put together the best project that we possibly could. Just as a reminder, the stormwater pump station is funded through a flood hazard risk reduction grant, at least in part, and then the sanitary sewer pump station is funded through local municipal bonding. So with regards to that, we thought it would be good and proper to provide an overall presentation to the council and the mayor. I have brought some handouts that I'd like to distribute to the mayor and council and administration, and Ryan McGowan is going to give a presentation with the use of some of the additional presentation boards that he has with him as well. So the project site is the current location of your sanitary sewer pump station. Currently, there is one sewer pump station. The property to the east is owned by the church. The property to the west and to the north is owned by individual property owners. The overall context of the sanitary sewer pump station is that the sewer pump station will be constructed, the new sewer pump station will be constructed, while the old current sewer pump station will remain in place. Once that sewer pump station is completed, that would then allow us to move forward with the storm sewer pump station after decommissioning of the current existing sanitary sewer pump station. So we are prepared to discuss the overall sanitary sewer pump station today, along with the project schedule, the project budgets. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ryan McGowan so he can give you a little more detail on the project.
Oh, you mean to set it up?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
I guess we didn't.
I turned the rendering around so everyone could see that. What's that? Yeah, if they're all looking at it.
Easel.
I think it's in the side room. Mark, can you see if it's in the
Can we
side?
get it?
Originally, we were figuring it
I
would
mean,
be to you guys.
Big one forward to face the council?
I was just trying to provide to the public. Ray asked if we had enough to give out, so.
In the closet,
have,
not in that one, is it?
No.
For the entire.
No, not the whole audience, sir.
That's coming from London.
Mark's grabbing one.
Josie could have put it together.
And then there.
All right. Well, while Mark's grabbing that, if you don't mind, I'll start to move forward. As you, I'm sure, what drew your attention first was the rendering that we prepared. The rendering is sort of a depiction of what the final site will look like. The main pump station you're seeing there is essentially the size of the original structure, enlarged a little bit, but the original structure that's there, the original pump station that's there, will be completely demolished and replaced with this structure. If you'll notice slightly back to the right of it, there's a rather large generator that will sit between the stormwater pump station structure, which is in the front, and the sanitary pump station structure, which is in the back of the site. So it's a rather large tan building. The top elevation's approximately 30 feet. The top elevation of the building is about 28 and a half feet. So it's standing at street level. You won't be able to see it, but you know they are about the same height. And then the last thing that you could sort of see off to the right there is a utility transformer. The electric company has to bring power to the site and has to essentially change the voltage of the power coming in. So a utility transformer is required, both for the sanitary and the stormwater pump station. So it's a single transformer that will service the entire set of facilities that are there.
Here, can you point it out that way, Jim?
the
'cause
pub-
We
we have-
we have pictures of
We
it.
have pictures.
There you go.
Okay, so as Jim said, it's two separate projects on one small site, and one is completely contingent on the other. Right now, you have a sanitary wet well and a sanitary pump station on that site, and we are going to reutilize that wet well for the stormwater project. So we have to move forward with the sanitary project, complete it entirely, and then move forward with the stormwater project. The sanitary pump station is proposed to be at the back of the site. So all of the existing infrastructure will remain in place. We'll build right behind it, and then when everything's ready to go, we'll switch over to it. Then once that's done, we'll come forward, we'll demolish the existing structure, and we'll continue with the stormwater project work. Most of the sanitary project work is directly on this site. It's the construction of the new pump station, a wet well, and the generator that I referenced previously. The generator actually service both pump stations. And we'll do it as part of the first project.
Okay, so what we're looking at there in the front, that cottage-like structure,
Yes,
is the stormwater pump
correct.
station, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you have a generator behind that, and then you have another structure behind that which isn't shown in
Correct.
this picture,
The-
which is going to be, it's kind of just reversed, because this is a sewer pump station presentation, but we're looking at the stormwater.
Right, the sewer
Pump
pump
station.
station is
Okay.
hidden at the very back of the site.
Gotcha. So,
And what's the white
The-
or whatever, what is this?
Off to the right there, that would be the utility transformer that I was referencing. The electric company has to have a pad mount transformer, and it has to be above the flood elevation. So it has to be 7 feet off the ground one of those, rather large, green, potentially tan if we talk to the electric company, boxes. And there's not a whole lot that we can do to screen it because there are significant requirements for airspace for movement around it. It has like little fins on the side of it, and they're all for cooling.
So it's louvered.
Yeah, along the sides of it, yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a photograph, not just of the front, but of the back part,
Well,
looking that way.
the back will be essentially a prefabricated building, which we can provide photos of other structures that are nearly identical to that. Go ahead.
This is a Google image from the street where we were able to superimpose what it might look like, or as best we can from the street. And we didn't go to the site and physically take pictures and try and superimpose that, but we did use Google to the best of our ability. If Google had gotten around the other side, we could have done that, but we did not accomplish that.
I mean, this is very attractive, but what are we looking at from the other side?
It's a very good question, and that's where the buffering
Take a
comes in.
doghouse.
So along the parking lot side, there is an existing stand of trees and vegetation. And to the rear, there's also vegetation. Some of that will be removed to accommodate the construction of the pump station, but there will be buffering added back in as well as fencing as well.
The rear building will also be an A-framed building, and frankly, from the back, there'll be no entrance or anything from the rear of the structure. So it'll essentially look like a shed with siding.
It'll be fenced, or it's not
The
fenced?
entire yard will be fenced, and then the building itself will be elevated, again, approximately 7 feet off the grade of the site to be above
And
the
then
flood elevation.
30 feet high, you said?
I'm trying to think how to put this, the generator that's behind the house, the top elevation of that structure will be approximately elevation 30. The pump station behind it, the top of that building will be approximately elevation 26. And then the pump station in the front, the one that you're seeing in that rendering there, the top of that building is approximately elevation 28 and a half.
But again, to clarify, that's elevation above sea level, not elevation
Yes.
above ground.
These are elevations, and the site elevation is roughly elevation 6. So if the building elevation is 30, you'd subtract about 6 from that, it's about 24 feet off the ground.
Right. And the current building elevation, the ridge on that is probably elevation 25 or so?
I would say 24 or 25, yeah. We'll be a few feet higher, but not, certainly not a whole floor.
It's similar in structure and height.
So houses are looking at that from the back?
The rear houses will look at the pump station building in the back, which again is siding and an A-frame roof with shingles. So it'll essentially just look like a large shed in a backyard.
I would have liked to have seen that.
Oh, we could certainly provide images for what that will look like.
Well, with the consensus of the rest of the council. Just don't do it for me.
On this plan,
Yeah,
Brian,
there you go.
Oops, sorry.
Brian, on this site plan, is it this square you're referring to a masonry building, that's the existing building that's there now, correct?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
site plan you have is for the sanitary project.
Okay,
I have
Right.
we have an enlarged version that shows the sanitary project, then we did bring the other site plan just for informational purposes. We didn't want to give you both,
It's lost.
because frankly, we don't want any confusion between the two. This frankly is the sanitary presentation, so we're trying to just give you that material.
yeah.
The existing, as I said, the existing masonry structure, everything has to remain functional until the new pump station is fully constructed and ready to be online that's behind it. So we essentially have to build around what's there, and then once we're done, we'll come back and demolish what's there.
I understand that. This is just ugly.
And so, if I could,
You
so
don't
for
put
the
a
benefit
tree
of the
there,
public, again, the existing structure is this lighter square at this location. As what you see today from the street. Behind that structure, and that structure will stay there through construction, and then essentially be converted into the storm water pump station at a later date. So there will always be, and has been, a structure at that location. It'll be the same size and nature and height. Directly behind that would be the generator, which is going to service both facilities. And again, I'm pointing at not the picture, but the site plan map. And then adjacent to that is the actual prefabricated
I would think so.
sanitary sewer pump station and appurtenances, which will replace the old existing pump station. So essentially, we're really putting 2 pump stations and a generator on a site which once only had one pump station and a much smaller generator.
Yes.
So that said earlier, that space is at a premium, and we try to maximize the efficiency of the site and maintain buffers and a aesthetic value to the site as much as possible.
So I'll move on to budget and schedule unless anybody has any questions at this point. Okay, seeing none. We are finalizing some changes to the plans and specifications, which we intend to mail to Grant and Craig on Friday. We're expecting to be able to go out to bid with the project in the first week of October. We understand that you have a meeting either on the 3rd or on the 4th, so we will be looking for authorization to bid either on the 5th or 6th immediately after that meeting. We'll open bids probably in early November. The construction duration was originally projected to be 270 days. We've recently extended it to 310 because the generator type and size that you have requires at least a 6-month lead time between order and delivery. So you have to give them some time to be able to install it, and test it, and do all of those things after.
So bid opening beginning in November, is what you're saying?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah, well, our bid opening would be like the first week in November,
Okay.
or frankly, the last week in October.
Right, and we'll work with the clerk
Okay.
and the administrator with regards to the exact days.
Yes.
So it gets
Okay.
worked into the resolution.
So you're 310 days from that bid opening or from
Well,
award, I guess?
310 days from the award.
From award, okay.
Right. So we're anticipating advertising in October and completing the project in October of the following
Okay.
year. And then concurrently, while all that's going on, we could advertise the stormwater project in the winter and award that sometime in late spring so that the contractor can begin to order their materials and be ready to go as soon as this project wraps up in October.
And then that one cannot begin till this one is completed, so that begins October 2019, roughly?
Correct.
Any idea on, I know you're not here for that,
Well, that-
but just ballpark.
That one's closer to a year and a half, frankly. So
And
we're
another
figuring
year and a half?
That's going to wrap up in
2020,
probably
2021?
2021, yeah. Early 2021.
Early 2021.
And Mayor, with regards to the schedule of that project, again, it's a pump station and a larger network of collection system. So the work on the pump stations can continue, is my understanding, that can continue year-round. However, work within the street would be limited to the acceptable construction periods of the borough.
Right, and that will include the work for discharge at the bay, a rather large force main that has to go in along 93rd. So there's some items that need to be addressed for that project, but we'll get there.
So in other words, what you're saying is you're going to somehow limit the degree of the work or whatever during the summer months that you can in each of these subsequent summers?
Right, we're gonna
20.
restrict work on the project to just on the site in the staging area
Okay.
during,
And nothing in the street, that's what you said? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
understood.
So all of the street work will be required to happen over your off-season.
Okay.
What again, I'm sorry, I missed you're basically going October to October on the sewer pump station,
For the sanitary project, that's correct.
soup to nuts. And then the storm pump station, you figure to go out tentatively, start construction when, about?
Well, there may be some aspects of that project that can start before this is wrapped up that are off-site. So we'll work with the contractor to see if they have interest in doing that. But frankly, I would anticipate that the storm project will probably begin in October, immediately after this project, the sanitary project concludes. And then it will run for approximately a year and a half. So it would wrap up in the spring of 2021.
The real challenge with the schedule has turned out to be the availability and the uniqueness of the larger generator meeting the requirements for not only the power supply, but also making sure that it's, quite frankly, the quietest, most efficient generator that we could possibly have the borough bring into the project.
Well, and we have some relatively good news on the generator exercising. We just confirmed that the generator only needs to be exercised once a month for 30 minutes. So that's a typical generator, you exercise once a week, anywhere from 30 minutes to half an hour, or 30 minutes to an hour. So only have to do it once a month is pretty significant.
So all in all, it's a 3-year project.
Between the two projects, approximately, yes.
And again, this generator is
huge. No, I'm just saying it's a huge project.
Yes, on a tiny site.
How much street disruption do you need for the sewer pump station?
For the sanitary project, very little. There's connections to some of the manholes, and then we have to redo the water service and the sort of the outlet of the force main. But frankly, I wouldn't anticipate closing more than half the road for any more than a week or two. There's very little off-site for the sanitary project.
Niagara Falls, yeah.
I'm going to see if there's a lot of people that live in the area in the audience, and normally we don't take questions during the work session, but I think based on the fact that everybody's here and, you know, we've got the time, if anybody would like to ask any questions, get any more specific information concerning the project. If you come up to the podium and you can say your name and address for the record, and then we can best answer your question.
Hi, I'm Martin Lucas. I live at 345 93rd Street. I would like to know overall two things. How much of the street is really going to be torn up? He's talking about just the sanitary portion. And once it's torn up, will the residents have the opportunity to put their overhead power lines under the street?
Good question.
And I know I've spoken to some of my neighbors, and there are several who would be interested in that.
Who you might take advantage of the opportunity while the street's open.
It's a time when you're going to have the street torn up, so it would be a good time to do that.
So what would be your best advice to those residents that want to do something like that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see a problem incorporating that into the project. We haven't to this point, but to be frank, there were a couple utility pole relocations that had to happen anyway.
But to add on to what Ryan is saying, so if I understand the gentleman's question correctly, while the road is open, they would like to individually pay to have their overhead service
Undergrounded.
Yeah,
Wait,
we certainly could work with the contractors to do that.
But Marty, are you talking about taking the poles down, or are you just talking about the service from the?
I live on the side of the street that the power comes from the pole across the street.
Right.
I'm looking to put that underground.
Right, you're not looking at with the neighbors to take poles down. They're just the individual services to the homes.
Correct,
Okay.
and
Just the
to
service.
that extent, then
Yeah.
we would work with the contractor, build it into the contractor's obligation of schedule to accommodate the work by others.
Yeah, and that's actually standard operating procedure now. Anytime we do the road work, we put those conduits in for you, actually. No cost to you.
Another question.
It's a good idea. Maybe you can get more people to
But
do
then
it. 93rd Street.
But then people pay to put the wires through.
Right, yeah.
It's like $1,500. Yeah, I know, but I don't want them to think that the borough's going to cover that cost.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Kelly. I live at 332 93rd Street. I happen to be the cute little building right to the left of the rendering. A rendering which is very different from the preliminary rendering that I got to see of the project. And I have to agree with council member that I think the rendering is completely inadequate for a discussion of project because so much is going on behind what you're looking at that it really is quite meaningless for a presentation to people who are anywhere located near this project. The initial rendering I had was the generator on the right-hand side.
The original concept was two generators. We were able to consolidate to a single one and put it between the two pump stations.
Utilization of the existing generator and then adding another one to it, or?
We're actually eliminating the existing generator. Both pump stations will operate on a single generator.
Okay. Well, depending on what goes on beyond that project, it has a terrific deleterious effect potentially on the property of the church. Everybody on the other side of the property lives off the back of their houses. That's just the way it is. Certainly my backyard, which is my prized possession down here in Santa Harbor, you know, the previous pumping station was not a good neighbor. But after some corrections, it got fixed up to what it was. Right now, it's pretty acceptable, quite frankly. And it's kept neat by the township workers. I think a better rendering is in order. And I think, I know I needed permits and a lot of pictures when I put up my little 10-foot shed. Putting a shed behind a house, it needs to be truly aesthetically pleasing. And the generator is used when the power's out. So it's not really 24/7 usage.
No.
It's only an occasional usage. That's why it's tested once a month. Wouldn't there be some way to enclose it with the vents and the, and?
It is actually in a full enclosure.
I know, I've seen it.
Not the existing one. The new generator that's proposed is in a complete enclosure.
In the back of the building. That's why the rendering is so important.
It's in between the two.
Yeah. Good presentation, by the way.
Thank you. We actually have renderings, elevation views, I should say, of the prefabricated pump station for the sanitary sewer pump station. And we can provide that to the council tomorrow, and we can also send you a copy directly if you'd like. It is configured to look like a similar building.
Oh, okay, all right.
A garage.
Yeah, that would help to have that for people to see, and we can get it up on the website, and, that would be a big help.
Yeah.
It's like a garage with
really good
siding on
effort.
it.
Yeah, really a good effort has been made throughout the town with similar utility-type buildings to keep it aesthetically pleasing for the community. And I know I speak for my neighbors who were at the last meeting when we thought it was going to be discussed and it wasn't. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Patty DeMarco, 364 93rd. Can you tell me anything about the street closure for the second phase of it? I realize the first phase doesn't need to close for too much, but what about the second phase?
The second phase will involve the installation of a 54-inch diameter, which is almost 5 feet, diameter pipe that will run down the road all the way out to the bulkhead. So there will be some pretty significant street disruption during that portion. That is projected to be during the winter of 2020, from 2019 into the spring of 2020. Obviously, we'll work with residents. We'll incorporate into the contract that they have to work with the residents as much as possible to make accommodations during the contract. But when you're running a 54-inch pipe close to the curb line, I'm not going to pretend there won't be disruption.
Are we going to be able to get in and out of our driveways?
There might be short periods of time where you're not, while they're installing the pipe and that, but typically we make them required backfill it.
Will we
make
know
it
in
accessible at
advance?
the end of oh, absolutely.
Like what if I was in Florida and I came home and I can't get to my car?
Given the scenario here.
We'll keep you informed, Patty.
Yeah, I think no
Don't come home.
requirements
Don't tell me not to come home. Don't
We'll
come home.
send you
can't get
pictures,
in.
you'll know.
No, we'll definitely ensure that the contractor coordinates with all the residents, in a manner that's appropriate for the area.
We have quite a number of year-rounders on that street. In fact, we
Yeah.
probably have more year-rounders on that block
Yeah.
than most blocks in town. I think the rendering, though, it looks, at least what we can see of it, looks very much like the house across the street from me, looks very much like my house. It truly looks like it's going to fit in with the neighborhood from the parts that we can see. Like Joan, we probably need to see a little bit more because we have to take into consideration our neighbors on 92nd Street and what they'll be looking at. But, based on the committee here, I think that we'll end up making sure everybody's happy that way. The next part, after your stuff goes down, is the borough doing the new sewer lines and the water lines at the same time?
That's supposed to be going on in our 2018/19 road project. Now we're 19, well, I guess, it is more 1920. Out to bid in 18, begin 1920, or begin 19. Oh, you mean just on that street, but in other streets, Patty, you mean other streets in town or just
No,
your
I
street?
just mean this street.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just saying, if we're going to be tied up for 2 years.
Okay.
Are we doing everything at once?
So that'll be happening, when
And
did
that's
you say,
important, that we're
20?
doing everything at once.
Yes, once we open it up, we're replacing everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is not for this council, but there's water in my driveway since April 8th, 1998, from the last street fill. It's never, ever, ever gotten resolved, and I'm looking forward to the project. And I'll make sure that there's no water at the end. They won't sign off until we're done.
Ryan?
Thank you.
Ryan, does the pipe that you're talking about, that Patty was asking about, does that go down the middle of the street?
It's sort of offset to the right-hand side if you're starting at Third going towards the bay. It's closer to the curb line.
Because that's
North side.
So it's going to be on the north side of the street.
North
So
side.
actually, all the lines do right now.
The pipe is a 5-foot,
5 foot.
5-foot diameter pipe.
Yeah.
So it's a large pipe.
It's huge.
Yeah,
It's not-
I can't get from here to there with my groceries.
Correct. We will
Yeah.
make sure they have access to
Let alone
it.
climb over it. Yeah, no,
They'll carry them for
no,
you.
at the end of each day, they'll have to restore it to a passable condition to the maximum extent that's possible. Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions? And of course, if you do, once you leave, feel free to email Jill, and she'll get back to you with answers as quickly as she can. She can consult with these gentlemen. Now, how about council? Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Now, that's right. Sure, and we could put it downstairs. Yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Any other items, discussion? We got a little bit of time if anybody has something they'd like to say.
The two applications for the, that are, 2 events that we have on the agenda, do you want to talk anything about them, or just bring them up at the main meeting?
I'm not sure that there is anything to discuss about those.
Okay, just asking.
It was just, it was difficult to be able to get that rolling because the application process began with the chamber so long ago, and the applications must have gotten lost somewhere on someone's desk, because we saw a date of July 23rd on one of them. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, because there was a concern from Public Works on the Save Our
Yeah.
September
Right.
with the fire and the hay bales next to it.
And we just got word of it recently, and it's going to take place this Saturday, and we're going to approve it tonight, which is tough for Public Works, and I totally respect that. However, perhaps we need to tighten that window for outside agencies that choose to make a recommendation or an application to us for their events. 5 days is just out of the question.
I know Joan had brought up the parking concern, and has that been settled? I don't know.
Yes, the recommendation's been made by Jill and Grant and myself that the vendors have to park down at the 95th Street parking lot. They can drop off their products or whatever they have, but they have to put them down there. We're not issuing, they had asked for an astronomical amount of parking permits, which are not going to be permitted, so
Okay.
they will be parking down there. But they can drop everything off and then just walk 2 blocks.
But perhaps it would be worth our while to consider initiating a deadline. And I don't know that we have such a thing. If a program is going to be September 22nd, perhaps we must say by August 22nd, we have to have the information signed, sealed, and delivered so that we can circulate it.
Which we could do. The problem is, it's in there. They were within their guidelines with this special events application.
Well,
Yeah,
and
the way our-
So we
way
would
our
have to
ordinance-
knock it, we would have to
I
say
think
maybe if everything needs to begin,
Yeah.
like then we don't allow the 2 weeks before.
Right,
So perhaps you make it a 60-day, 45-day, 30-day.
because then how does Public Works and the police
Mm-hmm.
plan on this when they're just,
very
we're just approving it tonight?
It's very difficult, except the exception is they have it every year, and I think there
Right.
was a little bit of them being lax, thinking, well, we know what they want, but that can't be because things changed. Just like with the 96th Street renovation, the parking lot's closed. So either they didn't take that into consideration because the vendors used to park there also. So it is difficult.
But that's a perfectly good reason why they should get it in, because as
should.
Josie pointed out to me, they had this date, January 1st of 2018, it would have been just as easy for them to circulate that and get it in and put it in 6 months in advance. It wasn't recently planned. So I think we have to
Yes.
tighten up.
Yeah,
But it's a month out. I'm seeing signatures that are a month out on here. Because this event's the 22nd, and I'm seeing signatures here, August 22nd, August 15th, August 20th, so I don't understand why.
I saw one July, something was dated July also.
July 27th is when it came in, and then it was being signed off on over a month ago by the various departments. So I'm just not understanding the surprise if all the signatures are right here.
No, I don't disagree with that, but I do think that, because I don't know where it goes and how long it sits wherever, that we should, for 2019, have perhaps a different kind of process, that the application lands on somebody's desk, and then it's kept track of, you know, or maybe once a month, the people that are meeting with the events, all of them are sitting there, and once a month, they sit down and have a meeting and say, okay, you know, instead of waiting or having it.
All I see is on this application is it made a circle, and all the department heads signed off a month ago. Oh, okay. So these are August 31st, August 30th.
I'm not looking to blame, I'm looking to come up with a better process.
The correct.
That there should be, to me, one person that has the applications, and if you have to meet once a month off summer with the police, what is it, police, fire, whatever, and you all have them right there, and you just do it, and then it's done, instead of,
Isn't that our tourism director?
I was going to say, one of the reasons that we've chose to split those positions, tourism and recreation, this is a function that the tourism director will have more time to handle, and I don't think we'll have this problem moving forward. We'll be able to stay a little bit more on top of it with the applicants, making sure they get it in sooner and circulating within the department, so. I mean, clearly, we saw that there was an issue.
I just think we need a better process.
But I think the dates for introducing these applications has to change. Because if something requires Public Works, the police, the fire department, ties up the town, it has to be a minimum of 60 or 90 days.
Yeah.
I think everybody has to be on board with that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if it's a little run or something like that, 30 days, fine. But I think that the magnitude of the event should schedule the date.
Because how many hours do we do for Safer September? You have that's one of our bigger ones.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah. But it's not, I mean, I'm not saying this, but it's not a surprise.
Don't get me wrong, I think it's our best event of the whole year.
But it's not, right, it's not a surprise. And the date, it's in our calendar of events starting in January, so it's on everybody's radar. And then, you know, that's what I'm saying. It's so we even would have been aware of it with the renovations happening with the water tower. We know, you know, it's on the radar for the Christmas weekend, too, the Thanksgiving weekend. But I mean, it's not they're not surprises, is all I'm saying.
Right.
Okay.
They did change the layout.
applicant could change their mind.
Yeah.
Right.
I just
Right.
think a little bit of tweaking's in order, and I think we'll be able to,
Once you have
I
tourism
really don't
director
think
working
it's
on it.
We
gonna
can't
be an issue
surmise
moving
that, though they had it last year, that they wouldn't change it to another month
That's true.
or a different weekend. Or
But Miranda did reach out to everybody and get the dates so they could be put in publications that were happening in January. So she did verify all these dates and
Yeah,
stuff.
all the dates.
In like December, she was reaching out to everybody because the
Pre-confirmed.
publications are going out. So the dates were
Yeah, she did
verified.
But again, there was no
pre-application.
reason for them not to have the application in there. If it was already in there,
They realize their mistake.
then they should realize that by now. And it just has to be tweaked, that's all. No
Right.
blame
No,
for
that's,
anybody.
yeah, I'm not
It's
looking for
just
blame, I'm just
We
saying.
need a better system, that's all.
We'll fix it.
It shall be fixed.
It shall.
Turn the sun off.
Rocky's letter was. in
Anything else?
Should we take 15 minutes and talk about the bulkhead amendment that we're going to introduce at the first reading? Since we have quite a few people here to hear it.
Let me look for the full.
Do you want me to talk, or do you want,
Ordinance.
what do you want to do?
Well, This is, as you know, or maybe you folks don't know, we raised the bulkhead heights approximately, by ordinance, approximately 2 months ago, somewhat midsummer. And we raised them to 8 feet. And at that time, we did not address those bulkheads that fell below 6.7 feet, some being as low as below 4 feet. We didn't address how we were going to and quickly raise those bulkhead levels to mitigate the flooding that goes on in those areas. So what we have decided is we're going to kind of roll out, it's a matter of years where you will have an opportunity to bring your bulkheads into compliance. So if your bulkhead falls below 4 feet, you're going to have 24 months to bring it into compliance, which means you've got to get to 6.7 feet.
6.2.
6.2 to 6.2 feet within 24 months, be to your advantage to go to the 8 feet, but what we're going to require is the 6.2 feet. So that is if you're below 4 feet. Then the next tier, is it in the ordinance what the next tier is? I just know that one because that's the lowest. The next one's going to be a matter of 4 years.
4 years. 4.1 to 4.5.
So,
4 years.
okay.
Then
So 4 feet and below, you're going to be given 2 years to come into compliance. 4.1 to 4.5 feet, you're going to be given 4 years to come into compliance. 4.6 to 5 feet, you're going to be given 6 years to come in compliance. 5.1 to 5.5, you're going to be given 8 years to come into compliance. So that amendment is what we're going to be making tonight.
Right, and then trying to figure out how people are going to meet this requirement. And the storm that we had, Lenore, was it slightly over 5 feet, the storm we had last weekend or weekend before, and by the numbers that we have calculated, now don't quote me on this, but there were probably 40 bulkheads in town that were overrun by that 5-foot tide. So we had about 40 bulkheads that were breached, and all that flood water just ends up in the neighborhoods. It overcomes the storm drains, the storm system, contributes to all the massive flooding that we've been having in the north end of town. So that's the impetus behind this rollout the next 8 years to get these short bulkheads up to where they'll prevent a lot of this flooding going forward. And then the ordinance that we passed requires 8-foot bulkheads by 2050 for everybody.
So this
So
is
that's
just to
where we
get
are.
those really low ones into compliance, and we want to reach those homeowners, answer any questions they may have, explain to them why we're doing what we're doing. And it took a long time to get to where we're at and to roll this out, and it's based on the frequency of events that flood that height. So I don't remember the exact number, but of course, most frequently it breaches the 4 feet and so on. So we worked our way up from there. What most frequently causes the breach, we're going to deal with that first, and that was those under 4 feet. Council people have any questions?
Good explanation. Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it, when you hear it out loud?
This is a good move, and it all ties in with the storm and sewer things that we're doing up on 93rd Street. It's all part of our efforts to control the flooding.
To mitigate the flooding, yep. Anybody else?
One of the components,
Oh, I'm like, really?
where's she at? One of the other things that we're looking at with this is the funding mechanism that may be available to the property owners. Ryan was kind enough to send me the information from Brigantine where they did a special improvement district and for a specific area all along the bulkheads. And then they authorized a bond ordinance and did the special assessment for a 10-year period. I've asked Jim to research to see if he can find where a community was able to do basically the same thing, but created as almost like a revolving loan fund. Therefore, the property owner would be able to get the price, have the work done, and then we reimburse them. And the reason we're looking at that alternative is unfortunately, because it is government work, there's a lot of regulations that we have to follow, which makes the price of the construction inherently higher. So if the property owner is able to do it themselves, they will ultimately save money. So we're looking to verify whether or not we can create that other mechanism.
So you're looking at two options?
Those two so far.
So one of the questions maybe should be asked along with that, if the person, say it's a 10-year, as you suggested, if the person decides to sell the home, does that revert to the person that just bought the home?
Yeah, under special assessment, yes, it stays with your property.
With the property?
There's a
All right.
deed recorded at the county, and that obligation stays with the property. Now, obviously, if someone's selling, the buyer and seller can certainly negotiate that cost can be paid up front, but that's strictly between them. We would not dictate that.
Thank you.
We good? Anybody
I
else?
think so.
Okay, then, nothing left to discuss, motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourn till 4:30, 18 minutes.
Woo, who's counting?